Hello, everybody. Welcome to the digestive system lecture in our Health 4 online class. We're going to talk about the mechanism to refine fuel for our bodies. So the primary function of the digestive system is to break down the four major components of food. So that's protein, carbohydrates, fats, and also nucleic acids, but we'll talk about that later, into molecules small enough that can go through cell membranes, okay? So it's actually really hard for you to take up things through your gut if you're not meant to. So there have been cases where people try to commit suicide by drinking things like heavy metals, like mercury, and it's your gut doesn't take it up because it's too big of just for different reasons. It doesn't take up that particle. So we're going to talk about how do the things that we need to keep our body functioning, how do they go ahead and get through the digestive system and into our body, into our bloodstream. And whenever if we have anything that we don't use that we that can't be used by the body, we end up, it leaves our body, okay? So this is actually a pretty good picture that we'll come back to later that shows that the different steps, you're going to digest your food certain ways, you digest it with chemicals. There's three different salivary glands up in the head, okay? They do three different things. They're basically breaking down carbohydrates. Then you are secreting more acids into the stomach, and then as you get into the small intestine, you start pulling out the fluids that you need, or in the fluids and the all the rest of the nutrients that are small enough now that they can actually get through the digestive system, which is represented by the wall. They can get through the wall of the digestive system through this grate, is how it's represented here. And then everything else just keeps going and then gets compacted. And then you pull in a lot of water, okay? So water and then some more waste products. And then that gets processed by the kidney and the liver. And then whatever you end up not needing, if it's fluid, you lose it through urination. And if it's more solid material, you're going to lose it through defecation, okay? So how does this all work? Let's talk about it all. So, using a system of structures and chemicals, the food we eat is changed into things that our bodies use to continue to properly function, okay? So let's say we're eating a turkey sandwich. If you are vegan, pretend it's a tofurkey, okay? So what happens? First, we have to digest it. We have to break down food molecules. What else happens? During digestion, we secrete substances that release from either a cell or a gland that helps us in our digestion. We then do some absorbing. So it's no good to digest something if you're not then going to be able to absorb it. So you can digest all day long, but if you don't then absorb it through your guts, then you just wasted energy. You didn't get anything out of it. And then we excrete. We excrete anything that we cannot use. Okay, so what are the parts? So the digestive tract starts at the mouth and ends at the anus. And let's talk about it. So the mouth contains the teeth and the saliva. So the teeth are the site of physical digestion. So that is, we break stuff off with our teeth. We crush it down. We make it into smaller and smaller parts. And that's great. We do a good job of breaking it down. Then we have our salivary glands that secrete saliva, which not only lubricates the food so we can swallow it. If you ever, just take a minute to think about it. Have you ever swallowed bread or tortilla chips or something and you it's too dry and it gets kind of stuck in your throat? Well, that's really dangerous. You could die of asphyxiation that way. So our saliva is there to help lubricate food as we swallow it. There's also enzymes. There are also enzymes contained in saliva that break down starches. So if you ever put a piece of bread in your mouth and just let it dissolve, it'll start to taste sweet because what you're doing is you're breaking down the starches that are in the bread, and all you're left behind with is the glucose part of it. Okay, so then we do chemical and physical digestion here. So chemical digestion is the enzymes breaking stuff down, and physical is the teeth breaking stuff down. And then we could go into the pharynx, which is the shared space between the breathing and the eating. Okay, so that's there's two little parts here. These epiglottis, that's kind of this flap that's always covering your esophagus. So that's this, and that keeps food from going down the wrong tube. Okay. But then the next thing is we go into the esophagus. So the esophagus is this tube that connects the pharynx to the stomach, and it just helps move all of that food down to the stomach, okay? And it does it through this thing, these muscle contractions called peristalsis. And when it's in this point, the food is called bolus. It's basically this ball that we don't call food anymore, because if you were to see it again, definitely wouldn't want to eat it. We call it bolus at this point. In the stomach, so between the esophagus and the stomach is a sphincter called the pyloric sphincter, the cardiac sphincter. And the reason why it's called the cardiac sphincter is because it's what, when that fails, the acid from the stomach goes up into the esophagus and you get what you call heartburn. So your heart is not actually burning, but the acid's going up into the esophagus and hurting that skin or that tissue, and that starts to hurt, and it's near your heart, so we call it that. This is people who have bulimia or people who just throw up very often. They start to wear down their esophagus and their back teeth because of all the acid that they bring up. Okay, the stomach. What's happening in the stomach? So the stomach is this very muscled organ here, okay? It secretes digestive juices which help break down food, specifically proteins, okay? So proteins are what are digested in the stomach. And what else? Its main function is actually storing food until it can be moved to the next part of the digestive system. Okay, it has muscular sacs, which are called rugae. So if you were to open up a stomach, it's not just an empty bag. It has all these ruffles in it, and those are always contracting to keep food moving. Whoops. And so when your stomach's growling, those walls are those fluffy, what do I call them, frilly looking parts are rubbing against each other because they don't have any food to rub, and that's your stomach growling. It makes a little noise as it's rubbing against each other. You get protein digestion because you release something called pepsin. That's a enzyme that will break up proteins. It may sound familiar because Pepsi is actually based on pepsin, because originally Pepsi was sold as a stomach concoction, something to help your stomach feel better. Okay. We also secrete hydrochloric acid from our stomach, which kills any microbes on our food, or as many microbes as possible. And we also secrete mucus, which again, it actually protects your stomach from digesting itself. If you ever have an ulcer is a hole in the stomach lining that it's basically the mucus lining is eaten by bacteria, and then acid can get in there and start burning through the stomach. And that's actually caused by stress. So too much stress, you mess up the pH in your body, in your blood system, because your blood system's trying so hard to get you away from something so scary. And so it's overproducing different chemicals that changes the pH of the stomach a little bit, and then different bacteria who should be getting broken down by hydrochloric acid, they're not so much because you're not making as much hydrochloric acid, and so then you start to break down that mucus layer, and then the hydrochloric acid gets into that, and then it burns, and it's awful. Okay, what else? You can absorb alcohol in the stomach. It is possible to absorb alcohol in the stomach, and so alcohol starts affecting you faster than food does. All right, what else? So if we go past the stomach, we get to the liver. The liver makes bile, and bile is what breaks down fats. So protein is broken down by the pepsin and hydrochloric acid in your stomach. Starches are broken down by amylase, which is the enzyme released in salivary gland from your saliva glands. The liver makes bile, which breaks down fats, and that's the other major category of what are called biomolecules, or the things that make up the food that we eat. Okay, so that's good. So how does it get from the liver to our digestive system? Because the liver isn't technically a part of the digestive system, it's just an accessory organ. Well, the liver takes that bile and puts it into the gallbladder. Okay, so the gallbladder is storing that bile until it's needed and drops it off. It's dropped off into the small intestine. Okay, so the first part of the small intestine, which is actually behind this. Stop. Okay, shush. The cat's having an issue. Okay, everything's fine. Some people may have had their gallbladder removed if they actually have, if it's hard for them to process bile. And so what means then is that the liver has no regulation in, it just dumps all the bile directly into the small intestine. So people who have their gallbladder removed have to be really careful about their diets. Okay. Then we have the pancreas, which also secretes enzymes, which break down. In this case, they're secreting enzymes that will allow the small intestine to do carbohydrate breakdown. And it also produces insulin, which tells our cells to absorb the sugar. We have all this sugar. Please take it into the cells so we can store it for later. Okay, what else happens? Oh, we're not there yet. Okay, let's keep going. So, what about the intestine? So, if you were to lay out the digestive system from the mouth, and this is the tongue, which is an important digestive organ, it moves food around. If you lay it out from start to finish, you'll see that almost all of it is actually small intestine, and then we have a little bit of large intestine, and then the anus, the rectum and the anus, okay? So, what's up with that? What's happening there? So, the small intestine, from the stomach, food is going to enter the small intestine. Nutrients are absorbed in the first part, okay? And then we continue to digest it. We digest stuff by bile and digestive enzymes like amylase that are made in the pancreas as we keep moving down this, okay? So then what happens? We're digesting. Why is it so long? Because the longer it is, the more surface area there is for absorption to happen. So you see in animals that occasionally eat or only eat plants, they have to have a really long digestive system because it's really hard for us to break down plants. It's just we don't have the utilities to do it. So if you've ever heard that if you eat celery, you actually use more calories eating celery than you gain from absorbing it, that's true because it takes us so long to digest anything out of celery. Oh my God. And so by the time it gets to the end, we still haven't digested enough to absorb anything. Now, most things aren't as hard to eat as celery. So your spinach and your potatoes and all these things, they'll get digested and absorbed somewhere in the middle here. But all the absorption of food has to happen by the end of the 22 feet that make up our small intestine. Okay, so by then, so this is the appendix. The appendix is thought to have some important immune functionality that helps us kind of regulate our immune system when we're babies, and then as we get older, it's not needed as so much, and so it can become inflamed, and then needs to be taken out through appendicitis. Okay, cool, awesome, keep moving. So let's say we didn't go into the appendix, we instead went into the large intestine. What's the large intestine for? The large intestine is all about, there are bacteria in our large intestine. This is where our microfauna is. Like if you're eating yogurt, you're supplying bacteria for this part of your body, and it digests, it does some more digestion, and what it does is it causes vitamin absorption and water absorption. So the large intestine is where vitamins and water are absorbed. Okay, so the small intestine is about breaking down carbohydrates and absorbing everything. The stomach is about breaking down proteins. The mouth helps us break down some carbohydrates. Oh, right, and then fat is also broken down in the small intestine. So small intestine is about fats and so lipids and carbohydrates. The stomach is breaking down proteins, and this large intestine is about absorbing vitamins and water. Okay, so then anything else left over means that we can't use it. We just don't use it, and so we get rid of it. Okay, that's when elimination happens. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay, let's keep going. Let's talk about this. So that's all you need to know about the anatomy and physiology of the digestive system. If you want to take more, that we have plenty of anatomy classes that are very exciting. I highly suggest them. So let's talk about nutrition and eating patterns. So why do we care about nutrition? This is going to be something we see come up a lot. It happens. We talked about how nutrition is important during in preventing stress. It's important when you're dealing with stress. It's important after stress. It's important if you are worried about alcohol intake. Nutrition it's this huge recurring topic. It can influence and control the majority of most diseases. So the two big things that are going to control your disease rate or your disease state are going to be your nutrition and your stress response. So you could be the least stressed person in the entire world, but if you're not eating the right food, you're still going to get sick. Okay, so the exciting thing is you have the ability, to some degree, to control this tremendous influence on your health. So you get to decide, for the most part, what food is going into your body. Okay, so let's kind of think about this. So a nutritious diet should include 6 nutrients with an emphasis on complex rather than simple carbohydrates. We'll talk about that. You want to focus on fruits, veggies, and whole grains. You want to decrease your fats, your saturated fats, your sodiums, and your sugars. This is really hard because we're primed and ready to just really go for these things. We'll talk about that. And you want to limit, but still have enough of your daily calories. So as Michael Pollan said in one of his books, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. That's a pretty good way to think about it. So if you're not eating plants, you're probably not. And so it's kind of weird. When I was a kid, I used to get really weirded out to think, why am I eating lettuce? I'm eating a leaf. Why am I eating a leaf? I'm not, a panda bear eating bamboo. Why am I? But it's actually not a weird thing to think about. We should eat more vegetables, and we have such a very fast food society that says, oh, just grab a hamburger quick and run, that it's very easy. It's a lot easier to do that and eat a hamburger while you're driving your car than it is to eat a salad while you're driving your car. But California especially has been good about putting out other alternatives to just the McRib and saying, okay, so for every anyway, we'll get into it. How it basically just it's better for you to eat more vegetables than it is meat. We'll get into it. And I'm not a vegetarian. So what's a calorie anyway? So when we talk about a calorie, what we're really saying is a kilocalorie, because you'll see on your food. So a calorie is a measurement that is just telling you. All a calorie is, by definition, is how much heat it takes to raise 1 cubic centimeter or 1 milliliter of water 1 degree Celsius. So that's how much heat it takes to heat up 1 little cube of water. Awesome. So if we only took in 2,000 of those, we would be very dead, because it takes a lot of energy to power the human body, okay? Our brain uses so much energy because it's always doing so many different things, especially if you're in a college class. And so we actually, when we say 2,000 calorie diet, we're saying it's actually 2 million calories, but that sounds really scary. So we sneakily say, oh, it's a calorie if it's a big C. So whenever you look at food, it's always going to have, and we're going to look at labels, where it's always going to have a big C, which stands for kilocalorie. Okay, 2,000 kilocalories per day is about what a typical person needs to meet their energy needs. So this is somebody just going through a regular day. Are you going to work? Are you taking care of a kid? Are you running? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? You need about 2,000 calories to maintain your functionality and your weight. Okay. So what does that mean? You need that much energy to do your work, okay? And calories are the measure of that energy. So we have there's 3 macromolecules we're going to talk about, 3 nutrients that we're going to talk about here, and they give us different amounts of calories. So fat gives us 9 calories per gram of fat. Protein and carbohydrates both give us 4 calories per gram of fat. So if you were an animal out on the savannah and you're worried about getting enough food, you're going to go for the fattiest thing possible, which is what we did before we figured out farming to the extent that we have it now. The reason why we have such sweet tooths and why things taste sweet is because if they are things that have, or even just like fatty foods, why do they taste so good? Fat gives us more calories per gram, which is awesome if you have a very limited food intake, but it's really bad if you live in a society where food is everywhere and you're not really worried about, when is your next meal going to happen, okay? If you are, then eating fats is better for you, but there's a better kind of fat out there than the saturated fats. So let's talk about these essential macromolecules. So we have carbohydrates, that's going to be our breads. We have our proteins, which is our meats, and there's stuff that's in dairy and in beans and eggs. And then our fats, which are going to come from oils, from nuts, from avocados, etc. There are also what are called essential micronutrients, and that's going to be water, which provides no caloric intake but is incredibly important in maintaining your body. A lot of times when we don't feel well, the very first thing, what it really usually almost always is you're dehydrated, because we tend to be dehydrated as a species. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Vitamins are organic substances that we need to remain functional. We'll talk about some of these. Vitamin C keeps us, for some reason, from getting scurvy. Yeah, we'll get into it. Minerals are inorganic things, so that means that so minerals make up rocks, and so it's a weird idea to think, hey, there's some rock building materials that we have to have in our bodies, but this is stuff like calcium and potassium and phosphorus and all these things that if we didn't have, we couldn't make bones, we couldn't maintain our bloodstream, we couldn't have muscles, that kind of thing. So these are very important. Essential nutrients are all things that our body needs but does not produce. Okay, so we don't make these things, so we have to take them in. So let's start with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the main fuel source for your body. They should make up about 45 to 65% of your calories per day. And there's two kinds. We have simple carbohydrates, and then we have complex ones. So complex ones have multiple sugar units. They include starches and dietary fiber. So this is anything that is refined, like refined sugar. It could include unrefined, like whole grains. So in this case, we're talking white bread versus whole wheat bread, okay? So refined sugars versus unrefined sugars. So what's in between simple and complex carbohydrates? So simple carbohydrates are found in natural foods such as fruits, milks, and vegetables. But we also can find refined sugar in it's refined simple sugars in anything you make with just regular sugar. Okay, the problem is that these foods don't contain vitamins, and so you can take something that could be nutritious, like an apple, and then if you extract that sugar and just use it to make cake, that's not great. You want to have a more complex sugar than that. Okay. So simple carbohydrates are a single sugar. So this is a simple carbohydrate. They have this very characteristic shape. This is a dicarbohydrate. Okay. So simple carbohydrates could be monosaccharides or disaccharides. So two sugars. There's di means two, like bicycle, but it's with a D. And so you're gonna have two sugars together. So that's going to be something like sucrose, which is table sugar, and lactose, which we find in milk. So you'll notice, what do you notice? We have sucrose, lactose, glucose, fructose. Anything with an OSE is a sugar. Okay, and the sugar is a carbohydrate. So what about those complex carbohydrates? These are things that you find that in your whole wheats, in your beans, and your pastas that are more whole wheat, and in starches. These are more complex. They're harder for us to digest, and that's actually a really good thing because, again, we tend to be an overfed species, and so by getting the more complex carbohydrates, you're getting roughage and fiber, which you really need, and you are getting the minerals that you are not getting like if you eat cake, okay? So complex carbohydrates are going to be made of polysaccharides. So if each one of these is a sugar or a saccharide, then by having multiples of them, this is now a polysaccharide. So this is 3 or more sugars. And it should be about 50% of your daily calories, okay? So this means you should be eating plants. So that's going to be your starches and your celluloses. So starch includes potatoes. Cellulose is going to be anything green, okay? And you want to look for whole grains, okay? So if you're like, I can't make my entire diet half plant, well, it's not just talking about eating a salad. This is also talking about whole grain stuff. And remember that these complex carbohydrates or the simple carbohydrates are going to give you about 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate, okay? So why would we prefer to have complex carbohydrates rather than simple carbohydrates? These are absorbed more slowly, which give you a better and more constant supply of energy, okay? So if you think about, so there's this lab we do when this is an in-person class where you take and you set a Cheeto on fire and then you set a pecan on fire, and so, or a peanut, okay? We don't use peanuts in class because of allergies, so we'll set instead a pecan on fire. And the idea is the Cheeto flares up really fast and burns out as done, okay? Whereas the peanut or the nut, whatever nut you're using, it takes a little while to light, but once it lights, it stays lit for a long time. So it gives you light for longer. It's giving you energy for longer, okay? So given the choice, a lot of people might go for the Cheeto over the peanut because, oh, maybe it tastes better, but it's actually a lot better for you to eat nuts than it is simple carbohydrates like sugars and Cheetos, okay? Because it provides a steady source of energy, so you don't have peaks and valleys in your energy source, and you don't start storing things as fat as much. It's very important also for stabilizing your blood sugar. That definitely will prevent or can prevent diabetes. Okay, so let's talk about an ideal source of energy. Carbohydrates are great, okay? So refined carbohydrates versus whole grains. All grains are whole before you process them. That means they have 3 layers to them. And you may have heard of bran. Well, that's just a part of a grain. So during processing, when you go through into refined carbohydrates, the germ and the bran are separated, leaving just the starch of the endosperm. That's all you're left with, okay? So then you go and you put this, becomes wheat germ, and we use it for things, and then the bran goes into cereal or muffins, Okay, these refined carbohydrates are low in fiber because you took it out. So if you've ever heard of a bran muffin, you know they're really good because they're full of fiber, because they're basically all the fiber that was originally in a carbohydrate and we've taken it out. Okay. Also, by taking away the germ, that is what feeds the plant as it's growing. So it's full of minerals and vitamins and everything else. If you take away the germ, then your carbohydrate doesn't have any of that to then feed you. Okay. So you don't have any of the vitamins and minerals that makes it a good source. Okay. It's just straight up sugar. It's just straight up carbs. Whenever people say they're cutting carbs out of their diet, this is the refined carbs, the simple sugars are the ones that they're talking about. Okay. So again, if you think about the endosperm is the biggest part of the nut, and so people thought by taking the bran and the germ off, oh, well, we're making a pure substance. Well, that's fine, but you're losing all these trace elements, all the fiber, and so many vitamins. Okay, we don't want that. Okay, during digestion, carbohydrates are broken down into these single sugar molecules because that's what we need to absorb. Okay, and so you might think, well, then why don't I just eat simple sugars because it absorbs easier? Yeah, it absorbs really easy, really fast, but then we don't have anything to do with it, and so we store it as fat, and that becomes a problem. Okay, so if you are an athlete, you know that you do what's called carbo loading right before a game or a meet, which is where you go and you eat spaghetti or something that's a lot of really refined simple sugars, because you're going to put it in your bloodstream really fast, but then you're going to go work out like crazy, and so you're going to use it up. If you eat a lot of donuts, well, you might use a little bit of it, but then there's so much sugar left over in your bloodstream, you can go into what people colloquially or lovingly call a sugar crash, which is where suddenly you're very sleepy, so sleepy, because your body's like, oh no, we have all this energy, we don't know what to do with it, we better rest for a while and store it as fat just in case we never eat again. But that's not what we do as a species. We tend to be, again, we are very overfed, especially in carbohydrates. Okay. You need at least 130 grams of carbohydrates to function properly, okay, to have just proper brain function in both children and adults. So if you're on a diet, you have to still make sure you're taking in at least 130 grams a day of just carbohydrates, okay? So please, and remember, multiply that by 4 to get the total number of calories that you're getting. So be very careful of this if you go on low-carb diets, because your brain... You may get less inflammation in different parts of your body if you cut gluten out of your diet, but your brain still needs some carbohydrates. So you can't just eat meat. You have to also take in carbohydrates. By taking in carbohydrates, you also take in fiber, which is a component of complex carbs that we just talked about. We actually don't digest this, but we evolved eating it. And so okay, so if you're looking for a food that has a good ratio of whole grains, you want to have at least excuse me, a 1 to 10 ratio of whole grains to regular grains. Okay, so you're going to multiply the fiber from the nutrition label by 10. If it's more than the carbohydrates listed, then it's a good source of whole grains. Okay, so I just bought bread that's a whole wheat bread, or whole grain bread, sorry. I go in, I multiply the it says it has 40 grams of fiber, but it only has 30 calories. So even without, or 4 grams of fiber, if I multiply that by 10, it's 40, and then the calories are 30, which means it is a good source. It has more fiber than it does carbohydrates. Okay, so why do we care about fiber? Fiber is good. It lowers the blood pressure and lowers your cholesterol, which will lower your blood pressure, and reduces your risk of heart disease, because remember, high blood pressure, when we talked about their stress response, can lead to heart attacks and strokes and embolisms and so many problems. So we want to try and keep our blood pressure as low as possible. This is a very nice way of saying, so by saying facilitates digestion and elimination, it makes you poop, and if you've ever had a time in your life when you couldn't poop, you know that, oh boy, you really need to be able to do that. It really is painful if you did get too constipated. Okay, so fiber it's kind of, someone described it as like a bottle brush. It just literally cleans you out. So the more fiber you get, the easier it is for you to eliminate waste, okay? It just keeps your digestive tract very healthy. So very important to put in our diet. It also has been linked to a lot of cases of maintaining healthy weight. So when people, even if you're eating a muffin, if you go for a bran muffin, which is high in fiber, instead of like the chocolate muffin, which is refined sugars, you're going to end up being a healthier person with a better, more healthy weight. All right, so there we go. I knew I heard it somewhere. Fiber is nature's scrub brush. Okay, so what that means is when, whoop, you can't see it. Let's see. Fiber passes through but cannot be digested. So what happens is as it's passing through your digestive system, it starts to pick up a bunch of cholesterol and fat. If it's being absorbed by the fiber, it can't be absorbed by your body. So the fiber actually basically takes that cholesterol and fat and takes it out of your body. Okay? It makes you feel more full because the way we feel full is by there's what are called stretch receptors. When your stomach gets to a certain size and it stretches, when your the first part of your small intestine gets to a certain size and you guys, it's a rough night. It stretches, it releases a hormone that goes to your brain and says, we must have eaten enough because we're so full, we're literally stretched. And so that is, if you're filling up on fiber or say a salad, you're going to fill up faster than if you're eating refined sugars or just meats, okay? So because you're going to take up more space and then you're going to eat less food overall, okay? So you're going to take in more calorie-rich food, so this is better for you. And also, fiber is going to reduce your diabetes risk because, again, you're absorbing a lot of stuff in your digestive system that you, so if you're eating food that's high in fiber, you're eating food that's more refined, the less refined, more complex carbohydrate, which means you're going to be you're going to be having that more slow, steady release of energy. If you are getting these really big peaks and spikes in energy and then drops off after a while because you can't maintain it, you're much more likely to get diabetes later in life. So that's a danger we need to always be concerned about. Okay, so what are the two types of dietary fiber? We have what's called soluble fiber, which we find in stuff like oat bran, barley, nuts, seeds, beans, lentils, and fruits, strawberries, and many vegetables. Whoops. Okay, so soluble fiber helps improve your cholesterol levels. Okay, so eat your oats, your barley, your beans, and your peas. Insoluble adds bulk to stool. So what does that mean? It makes you poop more. And why is that good? You might think, my goal is not to poop all the time, Noel. What are you doing? No, it's just going to help you by adding bulk to your stool. It's going to help you clean out your system more often, which is healthy for you. Okay, so that's your whole wheat bread, your wheat bran, and then your fruit and vegetable skins. A lot of times people will they'll only eat baby carrots. They'll take the skin off their apples and their potatoes. No, it's not good for you. You should leave that on because it's got so much fiber and is so good for you. So total fiber is your functional versus plus your dietary fiber. So you got to read that label, okay? Functional fiber is either going to be isolated from some natural resource, or it's synthesized in a lab, and then it's added to your food product as a dietary supplement. So this is something where they're like, ooh, we need to add fiber to this Wonder Bread because otherwise there's no nutritional value to it. So it'll say, now with more fiber. And so they have added this synthetic fiber to it. Okay, so this could be something like, so this is not insulin, this is inulin, which is from chicory root, polydextrose, altered maltodextrin. So these don't sound like great things. They're not bad for you. But if you here's your recommended daily amount. You should only take in about between 21 and 25 grams per day. If you're a woman, about between 30 and 38 if you're a guy, depending on your age. And then for kids, it's your age plus 5. That's just whoever does the nutrition research says that this is a good amount. Okay. That is for your total fiber. Okay. So your total fiber should be on the range of between 20 and 40 grams per day. Okay. So that's enough talk about carbs. Let's move on to proteins. Delicious. I'm actually recording this the week of Thanksgiving, so I'm looking at this thing and thinking about turkey. That's not turkey, though. I think it's a chicken. Moving on. So proteins form the basic framework for our muscles, our bones, our hair, our nails. So much of our body is made up of proteins, which means in order to make proteins, we have to eat proteins. We also make a lot of our important parts of our blood, our enzymes, some of our hormones, our cell membranes are all carried out through proteins. The proteins are so important. We're basically big old protein sacks with some bones in there to keep us going. No, we're more complicated than that, but it's very important taken enough proteins to make sure that you can maintain your own body. So we can't make proteins out of nothing. We have to make it out of something, and that something comes from what we eat. Okay, so proteins are technically just amino acid chains. So a chain of amino acids, these are done in a specific order so they can carry out some specific function. Okay, there's only 20 different amino acids in all life forms. All life, only 20 amino acids. That is just like saying how there's only 4 DNA building blocks, only 4 DNA nucleic acids. So that is just another example of how life starts out so simple and then can become so complicated. There are 9 essential amino acids. So within that 20, there's 9 essential amino acids, which means we must eat them. So somewhere in our evolutionary history, we just lost the ability to make these amino acids. Maybe we're living somewhere where we get it really naturally. Who knows? But the idea is you have to take in these essential amino acids, okay? Again, I'm recording this 2 days for Thanksgiving, and the word tryptophan might look familiar. That is the amino acid that is released by turkey meat, by eating turkey meat. And that's also, people say, oh, that's what makes you so sleepy. Okay, technically, no. What makes you so sleepy after eating Thanksgiving is the fact that you just ate so much food, and there's so much stress around hanging out with families, or even if it's happy stress, it's still stress. And just taking the day to just sit and relax and eat food and try not to be stressed makes you sleepy. So it's not the tryptophan specifically that makes you sleepy, it's the fact that you've eaten so much food. The 11 other amino acids are produced by our body, but they have to, in order to make them, we have to take in components that are supplied by food. So let's talk about that. All right, so how do we get our protein? There are what is called complete protein sources that contain all the amino acids. So since we're animals, we can eat other animals and then get their amino acids and then use them to make our proteins. There are also what are called incomplete amino acids, which contain one or more of essential amino acids, but not all of them, okay? So sometimes we can complement vegetarian food options to then together get all 20 amino acids, or all 9 amino acids, because we make the rest of them. So red beans and rice, that combination, many cultures put red beans and rice together. So Cajun culture, Mexican culture, certain European cultures, just certain Eastern European cultures, just all of these people have this idea of taking red beans, putting in rice, suddenly it's amazing. Well, it not just tastes amazing, it's actually incredibly good for you. So beans and rice is really good for you. It gives you all the proteins you need. You can be vegetarian, vegan, as crazy as you want, and if you eat red beans and rice, you're going to get those complete proteins. Corn and beans does the same thing, and so does wheat and peanut butter. Okay, so these two together, which is great if you have whole wheat bread and peanut butter and you're making sandwiches, you have now combined together 2 incomplete protein sources to make 1 complete protein source. Yay! Go. Okay, so how much protein should we take in a day? So we said that we want to take in about 50% of our diet should be complex carbs. We should take in about, let's say, 30 grams of fiber a day. For men, you want to take in about 63 grams of protein a day. Women should get at least 50 grams per day. Children and pregnant women or breastfeeding women need more because they're growing. They're making things with their proteins. So children are making their own bodies, okay? They're growing muscles and bones and making hormones and enzymes, okay? Same thing with pregnant women or people who are breastfeeding, women who are breastfeeding. Pregnant women are making a person, so you need, in order to have the building blocks to make that person, you need to be eating a lot more proteins. And breastfeeding provides a lot of proteins to your kid, and so if you're giving your kid proteins, you need to be taking in more proteins as well to keep up your own supply. Okay, really what you need is about 0.8 grams for every 2.2 pounds of body weight. So you take your body weight, you multiply it by 2.2 pounds, and then multiply it by 0.8, and that'll tell you exactly how much protein you really need to maintain your body weight. So think about that. And remember that there's about, proteins give you about 4 calories per gram. Okay, which is the same as in carbohydrates. The idea is it takes about 4 calories to process protein. So if you take in way more than your 50 grams a day, you're going to start storing a lot of that extra protein. It's going to get converted into carbohydrates, and then those carbohydrates are going to, well, no, they're not. Well, yeah, they are. And so then the carbohydrates, if you don't use those up, they get converted into fats, and then they get stored, okay? So, again, everything has to be in balance. So what's up with fat? What's happening? So fat stores usable energy. So fat comes from the idea, again, that we used to live in places with unsure food supplies. So you could go a day or two or more without eating. So your body would say, well, if we do happen across food, we better eat as much as possible and then save whatever we can't use right now as fat, so then we'll use it later when we're really starving. Okay, so fat helps you your body absorb fat-soluble vitamins. So many of our vitamins get stored in our fat only, and then fat also gives us flavor and texture to foods. If you've ever had a really, really lean hamburger, you'll notice it doesn't taste as juicy as a regular hamburger, and that's because you took out a lot of the fat. The structural unit of fat is called a fatty acid or lipid. And fatty acids are really important, so you can't have a zero-fat diet. If you have a zero-fat diet, that's called a rabbit starvation. So if you eat rabbits, they don't have any fat that we can use. And so if you just eat rabbits and nothing else, you will starve and you will die. You can eat as many rabbits as you want. You'll still die of starvation because you're not taking in any fat. If you don't take in any fat, you can't make any hormones, you can't make your cell layers, and everything starts to break down, and that is very bad for you. So taking in some fat is very important. So when we are making lipids, these make really long hydrocarbon chains. We have this glycerol background, whatever. And then usually you have 3 chains of fatty acids coming off of it, okay? So because they're a lot bigger, they're considered a very concentrated form of, very concentrated form of energy in this molecule. We have about 9 calories per gram. So 1 tablespoon of sugar gives you 40 calories, okay? If you divide that by 9, you can figure out how many grams of lipids are in that, okay? A tablespoon of peanut butter gives you, so same amount as this, this is your carb, by the way. Oh, that's what we're doing. This is your carb, okay? If you have 1 tablespoon of sugar, that's 40 calories. 1 tablespoon of butter, on the other hand, not peanut butter, I think I said a second ago, that is your fat. That's going to give you so many more calories. Okay, and then why do we care about that? Because any calories we don't use up get stored as fat. Okay, lipids stay in your stomach longer, so you feel satiated. This is why we eat dessert last. Okay, so if you are putting sugary, fatty things into your body, you feel good afterwards. Yeah, I feel great. I'm done eating, even if you're not super full. Okay, so this is what a fatty acid looks like. Okay, so you have your backbone and then some stuff hanging off it. This is called an unsaturated chain. It makes a kink, and then you can't, if you think about this being 3-dimensional, this is not going to sit flat on top of itself, which means it's not going to be able to make a solid, and that's going to be important in just a second. Saturated fat. So saturated fats sit nice and flat. So if you have a whole container full of all these things, they're going to sit nice and flat. They stack nicely. If you have a box full of Legos and they're all flat on top of each other, you can smush them together and you can get a solid. Okay, so saturated fats are solid at room temperature. They're the leading sources of these things are all animal products. So you can get this in saturated fats are found in red meat, full dairy products, so none of that like 2% dairy. You get this in hot dogs and lunch meat. You also get this in palm and coconut oils. And it's not great. What saturated fats do is raise your blood levels of bad cholesterol. So bad cholesterol, these low density chains are going to build up in the walls of your arteries and veins and lead to, again, strokes, clots, embolisms, that kind of thing. And it makes it really hard if you have too much LDL, the low density cholesterol. It makes it hard for the good cholesterol, which is high density, to prevent inflammation. Because we need, again, you have to have some cholesterol. You have to have some fat in order to maintain so many things in your body. If you have a lot of bad cholesterol kind of clogging up the works, the good cholesterol can't get in there and do its job. So because your good cholesterol can't get in there and the bad cholesterol is clogging up the arteries, you have an increased chance of heart disease. So our unsaturated fats they have a kink in them because they've got double bonds or triple bonds and they just kind of go flip. They can't sit nice and stacked together, so instead they are liquid at room temperature, and these are our oils, okay? You could be monounsaturated, so you have only one part that has that crick in it, or you could be polyunsaturated, so you could have multiple points that has the crick in it. And these are usually from plant sources. So this is your avocado. This is your, let's look at it. Your oils, such as your peanut, olive, and canola oils. These actually are really good at helping lower cholesterol. Your polyunsaturated, these are your corn, your sunflower, your safflower, and your soybean oils. These are good because they contain essential fatty acids that we need in order to function, okay? These also lower cholesterol. And we also have what are called omega-3 fatty acids. So you've heard of these if you've heard of why fish is really good for you, but you can get omega-3s from things other than just fish. You can get it from leafy green vegetables, which again, you need that for that fiber. You can get it from walnuts, you can get it from canola oil. These all provide alpha-linoleic oil, which we need to maintain our bodies. And by taking this in, we reduce blood clots, inflammation, and our blood pressure, and overall our risk of heart attack. So by taking in unsaturated fats, you are less likely to have heart attacks. Saturated fats, on the other hand, again, you're going to see this difference. The animal products tend to be bad for us when it comes to fats. It's good for us when it comes to, well, it's okay for protein. The plant products are better for us when it comes to fats. Okay? What about unsaturated fats that are trans fats? So it's actually pretty illegal now to find trans fats anyway. So this is where, for some reason, you took an unsaturated fat and you put a whole bunch more hydrogens into it, which then forces a different configuration. And it turns a liquid into a solid, like margarine or shortening or partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. So that hydrogenation, that means it's been hydrogenized, so you've added a hydrogen to it. And if for some reason it sits this way, it's sort of solid, but not really. And these are really bad for us. For some reason, our body can't break them down, and it just starts to build up clumps of them, okay? So trans unsaturated fats are now almost, if not completely illegal to put into fast foods, etc., because they are so bad for us. They cause heart disease so badly, okay? So why do these even exist at all? These help foods stay on the shelf longer, so it extends the shelf life. But it's bad because it increases your bad cholesterol, your low density chains, and decreases your good cholesterol. So not only is it just adding the bad cholesterol, it's actively decreasing the good stuff. So again, it's been banned. These things have been banned in bakeries and in deep fried foods everywhere since January of 2010. Okay, so which is good because if you're already making the choice to go out to eat, you are already kind of putting your diet into the hands of someone else. And so you want to hope that they have your best interest at mind. They don't want to get you sick on purpose, but they also don't want to lose their food because it goes bad, okay? So a lot of times people for such a long time would use shortening and margarine instead of butter and oil because you could keep shortening on the shelf forever and it'll never go bad. Well, it's not good. It's not natural if something doesn't ever go bad, okay? You don't want to eat something that never goes bad. That means it's mostly inorganic bad products, okay? So it's okay if something eventually goes bad. You're less likely to die if you eat it. What else? You want to have less of your daily diet be less than 20 to 30% of your daily diet of your calories coming from fats. Okay, infants and young children they want to have a bit more fat than adults because they use that fat in their growth. Okay, and especially important is to make sure that only between 5 and 10% of your calories come from saturated and trans fats. Okay, if you have about 3 to 4 tablespoons of vegetable oil per day, you're going to get your daily need of essential fats. Okay, so we talked a little bit about fats and cholesterols together. So what's up with cholesterol? Cholesterol keeps our membranes fluid. It is really important in making steroid hormones. Our body makes it. We also eat it. If you're vegetarian, you may not eat it directly. You might get it in some other form. No, you won't. It's never found in plants because it has to do with the fluidity of the substance. Plants don't make steroids. They make things that kind of sort of look like steroids but aren't really steroids. So you can only get it if you're eating animal products. Okay? This is interesting. So if you are a ovo-vegetarian, so you eat eggs, you can get your cholesterol that way. Okay? And it used to be that there was a huge campaign in the 80s. Oh my god, cholesterol's killing you. It's so bad for you. Because they didn't realize there was good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. So trans fats ups your bad cholesterol. But if you eat something like egg yolk or dairy or animal fat, that's not necessarily bad cholesterol. It's what you do with it afterwards, okay? So good cholesterol is that high density chain, the HDL. Bad is LDL. And your cholesterol level is always a ratio of those two things to each other. So you could have the lowest LDL possible, but if you also have a low level of HDL, well, that's not great. You want to have high LDL, high HDL, low LDL. Okay, and how your body deals with these two different kinds of cholesterol is influenced by what you eat, how much exercise you get, and of course, genetics, because you could be the best dieter, you could eat the best diet, you could have the best exercise routine, but if your genetics just don't let you build up HDL, you're still going to have cholesterol problems. All right. We also have to take in water, but it gives us no energy. This helps distribute nutrients to our cells. It helps us regulate our body temperature. It eliminates waste. So by sweating, we get rid of a lot of cellular waste. So that's very important. So to maintain daily hydration, you want to take in so a lot of our water actually comes from our food, but you want to actually take in more by drinking, okay? So you want to take in men need to take in about 13 cups from beverages. Women need to take about 19 cups from beverages. So that is beverages. That is not just water. If you have to have 3 cups of coffee in the morning, well, that's 3 of your 9 or 13 cups of water, okay? So it doesn't necessarily have to be huge water bottles full of water. Water is the best you can do, but if you're someone who says, I can't drink water, I just can't, I have to put something in it, I have to drink coffee, well, then it's okay as long as you're taking in your hydration somehow. That does not count alcohol, because if you are taking in that much alcohol, you are going to kill yourself. So don't do it. Vitamins and minerals. What's the difference? Minerals, again, are inorganic, so they are solid crystal structures. So rocks are made of minerals also, but we don't eat rocks, we eat minerals, okay? Minerals are used for support, like in our bones and our teeth. They help our neurons function. So that's where sodium chloride is really important. There are cases of animals who will travel hundreds of miles to get to salt licks. Okay, so if you have property and or if you know someone who has cows or something, you'll know you have to put out salt licks so that they can take in enough mineral so that their brain can still function. Okay, we also need to take in iron, so then that's a mineral that will help our red blood cells carry oxygen. Okay, don't worry about that. Okay, what else about minerals? Our major minerals, you need about 100 milligrams each day of these different things. Okay, sodium and chloride, again, are really important in your neuron functionality. They keep your neurons working. Calcium helps us build bones. Phosphorus and magnesium help us regulate our heart rate. And potassium is another thing that's really important in muscle contractions and in neuron functionality. We have what are called trace minerals, which means you need about 10 milligrams or less each day. So that's iron, zinc iodide, copper, fluoride, and selenium. So there are people who freak out about, oh no, there's fluoride in our water, they're going to kill us. Oh my God, no. So the amount, you need 10 milligrams of fluoride to function. The amount of fluorine in your water is so much less than this, okay? So there's no way, if you were to take in enough fluorine through your tap water to be hurt, you would die of water poisoning first, okay? And that is the thing. So that is not a problem. The people who freak out about how much fluorine is in our water are not properly educated. Okay, so the reason why we fluoridate our water, we put fluoride in our water, is because fluoride will kill bacteria cells. Well, bacteria are much smaller than us, so a much smaller dosage of fluoride is going to hurt them before it hurts us. So before we did this, people would get horrible, horrible tooth infections. They would not go to the dentist. There would be nothing protecting their teeth. Even if they brushed their teeth every day, their teeth would start to rot. And as your teeth start to rot, you are increasing the chances of getting heart disease because as you're breathing in that bacteria, it's getting close. It can get to your heart. Okay, it's very bad for you. So it's very good we have this trace mineral in our water supplies. Calcium is an incredibly important mineral that we have to make sure we take in. You can eat it through dairy, tofu, grains, and small fish, but in order to get it in small fish, you have to eat the bones. And what it does is it helps maintain our bone and our tooth health. It's not a word, health. And it helps us contract our muscles. If you don't have it, you get what's called rickets. Okay, so that's when the long bones in our legs don't grow properly. They start to bend. And as you get older, we don't call it rickets, we call it osteoporosis. So that's where your bones start to just get less and less strong. And then as they're getting less strong, it's because they don't have as much calcium. And then the calcium just starts to wear away and the bones just sort of disintegrate. In order to, not only do you need calcium to maintain that bone strength, we actually have to do strength training also. So your body's like, oh yeah, that's why we have bones, is to hold ourselves up. If you take in too much calcium, you can get incredibly constipated, especially if you're not taking in fiber. And you can start to, it'll affect how other minerals are absorbed, okay? So just like in everything else, taking in too much of it can be really bad for you. Iron is really important. It comes from meats, legumes, which are beans, and dried fruit. Okay? It helps us transport oxygen in our blood, so it's very important. If you don't have it, you can get anemia and weakness, and you could actually, if this happens in kids, it can cause developmental delay because they're not getting enough oxygen to the brain to let the brain function. I heard someone recently telling somebody that all through her 20s, people thought she was really boring because she wouldn't go out. And she's like, no, I'm not boring. I'm just tired. And she didn't know why she was so tired until someone said, oh, you have anemia. So if you have anemia, your body's like, we're not getting enough oxygen. Just take it easy. So if you just, sometimes if you just take in an extra iron source by like taking a vitamin or a mineral pill, you're going to suddenly have a lot more energy. So again, talk to your doctor. Okay. But if you take in way too much iron, you can actually start vomiting because your stomach thinks you're being poisoned. You can go into shock and you can get heart failure, okay? So it's very important to have a blood test once a year at least to see where your iron levels are and to make sure they're not either too low or too high. Okay, what's up with vitamins? Vitamins are complex molecules. They are considered micronutrients because we need less than 1 gram per day. And they help us with very specific functions, okay? And so without them, we have disease states in these functions. A lot of these are made from our body, so we have bacteria that make them, but some of them we have to take in through our diet because we just don't make it. Okay, so there's 13 that are recognized in humans. There's our water-soluble vitamins. So these things we lose when we pee and we sweat. They don't get stored. There's no way to store it. We don't have, you can't store it in your bladder. That's the only place I can think of right now that contains a lot of fluid. Plants can store water-soluble vitamins because they have these huge plant water vacuoles in the middle, which can fill with water and vitamins. So we have to make our water-soluble vitamins every day or take them. At very high dosage, you can start to deteriorate certain parts of your body. We'll talk about that in a second. Water insoluble means just the opposite of water soluble. You can't dissolve them in water, but they can be stored in our body fat, okay? But again, because they can be stored in our body fat, you can build them up over time and get what's called hypervitaminosis, which is really bad for you. All right, so vitamin C and vitamin B are both water soluble. We are one of the only mammals that doesn't make its own vitamin C. So a lot of times, vitamin C, you may think of pirates when you think of this, because pirates and sailors of olden times would go out to sea. They wouldn't take any vegetables. They'd just take a lot of smoked meat with them, and then they'd start to get scurvy, which makes you insane. It makes you lose your teeth. It makes your tongue turn black and fall out. It's really bad for you. And so they figured out how to get that vitamin C back when they landed somewhere in the tropics, and Captain John Hook was like, hey guys, eat these limes, eat these grapefruits, eat these lemons, eat these oranges. And suddenly they start to feel so much better because they had those C vitamins, okay? It turns out they also could have just eaten the rats on their ship because rats also make vitamin C. But, you know, that's less appetizing. B vitamins are very important. People are starting to really understand that, like, B12 is so important, and I think that's also, it's called something else, I don't remember, because you can get shots of this, and it's supposed to make you feel like you have a lot of energy. Our water-soluble vitamins are vitamins D, A, K, and E. And then we have what are called antioxidant vitamins, which are vitamins A, C, and E. So you'll see some of these are repeated. So antioxidants means that they absorb any random crazy oxygens that are just tearing through our body, trying to break things down. So again, this lecture is running kind of long, so we'll go through this kind of quick. But our water-soluble vitamins, like vitamin C, you can find this in your citrus, your green veggies, and your strawberries. It's used to make connective tissue. So our skin is full of connective tissue. There's a disease where you don't make connective tissue and you die in your very early 20s, and it's very, very tragic. Okay. You also need vitamin C to help you absorb that iron that you need to put in your red blood cells so that you can take oxygen to your brain. It helps our immune system. It's an antioxidant. If you don't have it, you get scurvy and you can go crazy and lose your teeth and your tongue and many other things. If you take too much vitamin C, like this isn't just, if you eat oranges all day long, you're taking enough vitamins and also fiber that your fiber is going to limit how much vitamin C gets taken up, and you're going to be fine. But if you like a kid sits down and eats a whole container of vitamin C vitamins, that's really dangerous and really bad. You can get nauseous, you can start to throw up, you can get headaches, you can get rashes, and it can be really bad for you. The B vitamins include all of these guys, so many. What's the point? So let's start with folic acid, or folate. We need this, we get it from our leafy greens, our seeds, like sunflower seeds, and our enriched breads. And what this does is it helps us grow cells. So you kill cells every single day, which means you are making new cells every single day as well. If you don't have folate, you can't do that properly. Okay, you have to, some of the prenatal vitamins you take include folate because you need it when you're making the brain, very first thing. If you don't have it, you get anemia. So that's an iron thing. So folic acid is associated with iron as well. You can get heartburn, and you can actually get depression if you don't take enough folic acid. So check that. If you're taking antidepressants, make sure you have a good folic acid intake. Because this is water soluble, you can't really overdose on folic. Don't test that though, because every time you take folic acid, you're drinking water also, and then as your water is leaving your body, when you urinate, you're getting rid of any extra vitamin you took in. So if you think about it, if you've taken a multivitamin and then gone to the restroom later and had bright green pee, and you can smell the vitamin, that's the water-soluble vitamins that are leaving your body because you couldn't take them up. All right, what about vitamin D? Vitamin D is made in the skin. It's added to milk, and it protects us from a lot of UV radiation. It's involved in bone health. It regulates calcium and phosphorus. We make vitamin D ourselves when we're out in the sun. Okay, so vitamin D is made from precursors in our skin. The sun comes in and suddenly it, for some reason, activates the system so that we make our own vitamin D. So there was a case where people were so worried about their kids getting sunburned that they never let them see sunlight. They just were always covered. They always put so much sunscreen on that no UV radiation touched the skin, and kids started to get vitamin D deficiencies because they weren't giving them any food that had vitamin D in it, and they weren't making their own vitamin D. So as soon as kids started being born with rickets, people were like, "Oh no!" Because if you can't regulate calcium, then you can't build bones. If you can't build bones, your bones get squishy, and then that's rickets. Okay, so if you can't take in vitamin D because you're not exposed to any sunlight, then your bones can start to break down. All right, what about vitamin A? Vitamin A is really important in eye health. And we find it in fortified dairy, eggs, broccoli, oranges, and orange veggies like carrots and orange bell peppers, and orange fruits. Okay, cool. It's also really good you may have heard of vitamin A and vitamin E being really important in shampoos because it helps you maintain your skin and hair health. Vitamin K is found in leafy greens, soybeans, olive oil, avocados, and bacteria. And it helps us with our blood clotting and our bone health. Vitamin E, it comes from seeds, whole grains and leafy greens. It's an antioxidant, so it absorbs random oxygen that could otherwise hurt your body. It helps you with skin and membrane health. And that's all. I'm not going to go through the quick review because I think you could do that by going through all this, and this has been a very long lecture. Nope, we're not going to do that. Okay, you're done with this lecture. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and goodbye.